Good day, everyone. Welcome to another episode of my Python tutorial series. My name is Eliaza, and you are watching EE Lego Academy. So, in our last tutorial, we looked at the banking system, a banking project. So, the banking system was an upgrade to the previous banking system I had created using the command line interface. So, there was a command line banking system I had created previously, so you can check that tutorial. It's called banking system, the banking system part 1 to part 3. So it's an upgrade. That is our last project we did. This project is an upgrade to that project that I created. So now, to take us further, we want to be looking at new widgets in tkinter. So we aren't done yet with the different types of widgets we have in tkinter. So the purpose of this tutorial is to equip us with necessary skill sets to create Python graphical user interfaces or desktop applications using the Python programming language. So without further ado, we want to look at another widget called the frame widget. So I had used it earlier in my previous tutorial, that is in this tutorial, this banking system tutorial. I had used it when I was trying to place widget on my frame so that they can be aligned in a horizontal manner. So if you can still remember, when we created the login screen, I created a frame and I placed some widgets side by side. So you can see this widget here, the name widget for my label widget, or that is the name variable for my label widget, and this is my name entry variable for my entry widget. So I will just run the project again to show you exactly what I'm talking about. Now you see that these two widgets are side by side, name and then my entry widget and then ID and then this other entry widget. So the reason why I'm able to place them side by side is because they are on the same frame. Now this name and this entry widget, they are on a frame that was packed at the top before this other frame holding this ID and this second entry widget. So that's what we want to look at today. One of the things we want to look at today. So we're going to look at the frame widget, and then after that we are going to look at the scale widget. So the scale widget allows us to either display a horizontal or a vertical rectangular shape that allows us to be able to choose from a range of values. It allows us to enter a horizontal or a vertical rectangular shape that allows us to choose from a range of values. And then the next thing we're going to look at is the TreeView widget. Now the TreeView widget allows us to create a widget that looks similar to a table. Now this widget allows us to add things on it, like place people's names, text, and data, people's information, people's data. So it's similar to a table. It's like a table basically. And then the last widget we're going to look at is the top level. So the top level is a window screen that is generated or that depends on a TK window screen. So what that simply means is that it's a window screen that depends on another window screen. So it simply means that if I close the window screen that it is dependent upon, it's it itself, that is, it's going to close as well. So if it's on a window screen, or rather if it was generated from a window screen, if I decide to close the window screen it was generated from, it's going to close as well. So that's what we would look at lastly. So let's start. Now the very first thing I want to create, so we said we're going to look at the frame widget. So I'll just come here, click on Python file, I will call it frame widget. So after that, I will just say import tkinter. Let me increase the, it's okay. Import tkinter, and then I will just create my window screen tkinter dot tk. I will give it a title as window dot title. I will call it frame widget. I'll come here and say window dot geometry. I will call it, I'll give it 300 by 400. So after that, I will start creating frames. So now I want to create a frame widget at the top of my window screen that allows me to hold buttons ranging from 1, 2, 3, and 4. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, rather 3 buttons, and they will be placed horizontally side by side. That is what I'm trying to do. So I'll come here, I will say tkinter dot frame, so it's a widget. Now it is like a window screen itself because it allows us to hold widgets at a particular position on my window screen. So I'm placing it on the window screen, so I have to do that. And I will come here and say frame1 dot pack. So I will not give it any side, it's going to start packing from the top, but I will say fill is equal to tkinter dot both, and I will say expand equal to tkinter dot yes. So I'm creating 2 frames, so I will copy this, now paste. So again, the reason why I normally used to type fast is because I'm at work and I always do this project as that is for my once I'm done with my project at work, I immediately start doing my video. So that's the reason why I'm fast, but I will try my best to try to explain properly so that you can get exactly what I'm doing. So the very first frame will hold 3 buttons arranged in a horizontal manner, and then the second frame, my frame 2, will hold buttons arranged in a vertical manner, 3 buttons. So frame 1 will hold buttons from 1 to 3, that's 1, 2, 3, and then frame 2 will hold buttons 4, 5, 6 in a vertical manner. Now I'll just come here and say btn1. So btn1 is equal to tkinter dot button. Now it's going to be on my frame 1, and I will just say text is equal to button 1, and I'll give it some font. I'll say font Arial 30. I can pack that a btn1.pack, btn1.pack, and I will just say side is equal to tkinter dot left. So I'm giving it left because I also want to pack the next button at the left hand side. So because it was the first packed on the left hand side, the other buttons will just be packed beside it towards the right, that is on its right. So it's just similar to using the pack without specifying or place or saying where you want it to pack from. If you don't specify, we know that our widgets start to pack from the very top downwards. So it's the same thing. If I start to pack from the left, it starts from the left towards the right. So that's what I'm trying to do. So I will just copy this code to save myself the stress, and I'll paste it 3 more times, and I will call this one button 2, button 2, 2, 2. And I'll change it from here to 2 as well. 2. Now for the next one, so to save myself the stress, I will just copy this, but before that I will give it a title so that we will not lose track. And I will say first frame. So this one is for the first frame, and then for the next frame I'll paste this. I'll say second frame, second frame. Okay, so now I'll just change this one to button 4, maybe. So this one is button 3, button 4, button 4, button 5, button 5, button 6, button 6. Come here, change it to button 4, button 5. Now the most important thing is to change this one from frame 1 to frame 2, frame 2, frame 2. After that, you can now come here and run your main loop so that you can see exactly how it looks like. So you come here, click on play. You can see that your buttons are stacked in a particular manner. So the reason why this other one is also arranged in a horizontal manner because I did not change their orientation. So I'm going to do that so that it will be packed properly. So I'll just close that. First of all, I want to increase the width of my window screen. I'll give it 500 by 600. And for the next button, instead of saying pack left, I will just say pack. So they're going to start from the top, followed by the next one under the very first one packed at the top, and then the next one also packed at the top as well. So I will just run the code and see the result. So you can see that here our buttons are packed at the top. So I packed this one at the left hand side. That is why you are seeing that they are not expanding. So they are not expanding because I did not allow them to expand. If you want them to expand with the window screen, all I will need to do is to just copy this and they will also expand as well. So paste, paste, paste. If you expand, you see that it would also be expanding as well with the window screen. So that is how you can create a frame. So frame just acts as a background for you to place other widgets on. That's what they do. So now the next one we're looking at now is the scale widget. So it allows us to either create a horizontal or vertical rectangular bar that we can be able to choose from a list of numerical values. So I'll come here and say scale widget. Then you also want to import tkinter. Say import tkinter. Then you come here and say window tkinter dot tk. Come here, you say window dot title. Now give it. I will just say scale widget. Say window dot geometry. I'll give it a size of 300 by 400. After that, I can scroll down. I will want to create a title for it. I will just say topic is equal to tkinter dot label. I'll just say window text scale widget. So I'm going to do some things. I'll make it a bit more interesting. Arial 30 topic dot arc. It's going to be at the top. Now come here and say scale v is equal to tkinter dot scale. Say window. Now in order for me to specify whether it is vertical or horizontal, there is a parameter called orient that allows us to give it an argument of either horizontal or vertical. So I will come here and say tkinter dot, I will give it the horizontal orientation and I will give it some font. I will say Arial 30. So this will just increase the size of the text. So this will increase the size of the text displaying the numerical value at each point. So I'll come here and say scale.pack. Now before I create so I want to create a button that allows me to retrieve the value from the scale widget and then use it to make a sentence. So I'll just come here, I'll say df retrieve retrieve, and I'll come here. Now within this function, I can just come here and say result equal to the value selected is, I'll come here and say str, I will say scale v.get. So I'm trying to retrieve the value. And after that, so there's going to be some other label widget. So I'll just call it display equal to tkinter. Save myself the stress. I'll just copy this topic because it's also going to be a label widget. I will call it display, and instead of giving it some text, I will remove the text. So the text is going to be controlled when I click on that button. So I'll come here and say display.config. So I'm sure we can remember what config is. It allows us to perform an operation on a widget that was not performed initially or before. So I'll come here and say text, and I'll say result. The result. And after that, I'll come here and I'll say btn equal to tkinter button. And I'll say the button is on my window screen. I'll give it some text and I will say show. And after that, I will come here and say font. And I'll give it some font. And I'll say 30. And I'll say btn.pack. And after that, I now come here and say window.main loop. Right, so let's run the code. So you see that we have the scale widget. See, it's a horizontal. We gave it a horizontal orientation. If I now move it here and click on show, so it's supposed to display the text here, but let us see what is going on. The reason why it did not display. I said display.path, and okay, so I've not passed it yet to the button. I've not passed the function to the button, so my bad. I'll come here, I'll say command, and I'll say I'll just say retrieve. Let me use my lambda. Although I've already explained this concept before, but just to save myself the stress. Retrieve. So let us try it again. So if I should increase, so don't forget the reason why I'm doing this command is so that the button can call that function, that is execute the function. So I'll click on show, then you see that it displays the text. So I was actually supposed to display it under the button, and I want to increase the width of that window screen. Instead of packing it here, I'll just cut it from here, Ctrl X. Now pack it directly under the button, and after that, I will increase the width of my window screen to 500. Run my code again, move it to a certain point, click on show, and we get the value selected is 38. If you change it again, it changes it to 63. So that's what I was trying to do. Trying to retrieve the value from the scale widget and display it elsewhere. All right, so with that being said, let's now look at the table that we talked about. Now, this TreeView that I'm about to show you, I'm going to use it as an upgrade to upgrade the banking project that we talked about, that we did in our previous tutorial. So I will use it as an upgrade later, but let us introduce what it's all about. So it's like a table, because that's how I know it. That's what I know it to be. So TreeView project, and you can just come here and say import tkinter. So now it's inside the TTK class, or rather it's inside the TTK module. So the TTK is another module accessed from the tkinter module, or we can just say it's another file accessed from the tkinter file. It has its own classes too, which are widgets, just similar to how the tkinter module or file has its own classes, which are also widgets. So I'll come here and I will say table. So I will just create a label. First of all, I will say tkinter dot label, and I will come here and say window Okay, so before that, we want to create the window screen. I'll say window equal to tkinter dot tk. I'll come here and say window dot title, and I will just say TreeView widget. After that, I will just give it some size. I'll say window dot geometry. So in order for this thing to make sense to you, so that when we start to apply it to our project, it will be intuitive, I'm going to create a dictionary called data set. And this dictionary will hold exactly the data that I want that table to have. At the very first, um, so this will be a dictionary in a dictionary. I'm just following the same concept I used in my banking system in the last project. So now the very first dictionary, I will give it a key or a name of one. So I'll just say one, and to have its own key value pairs, I'll say name, Alex, course, physics, school, Oxford. Right, let me just say um, CGPA 4.732. Okay, so I will create another row. We just call it 2. So I would explain all these concepts that I'm doing. Although you guys should already have an idea based on our last project. So chemistry. So I'll create 4 rows for this student. Harvard. Rather 4 rows for each student. Say 4.34. Then the next one, I will just say 3. Then name Lex course mathematics average CGPA 4.569. Then the next one for name mathematics course G not G school year CGPA 4.201. Okay, so now this is my dictionary in a dictionary, although this is what we want to insert into that table. Now, the first thing I want to do is to create the tree view. I will call it tree v is equal to k dot tt. Okay, I've not imported it yet, have I? I'll say from tkinter, tkinter port ttk. It's a module anyway. I'll come down here and say ttk dot TreeView, say window, and after that I can decide to, I'll just leave it like that to TreeView. So where am I packing it to? I want to pack it to the right hand side, say TreeView dot pack. So now because I want it to be, so Well, normally if I wanted it to be vertically scrollable, I'm going to attach a scroll bar to it. So let me just do that so that we can have how the idea looks like. So if you can still remember from my previous tutorial of the scroll bar widget, in order for you to attach a scroll bar to a tree view, you have to use the command in the parentheses of the scroll bar. So I'll say window. So I'll give it an orientation, obviously, so that we will know exactly how the scroll bar will be. So I'm going to give it a vertical orientation. And I'll come here and say command is equal to my TreeView dot y view. So the reason why I'm giving it y view is so that it can be vertically scrollable. So I'll come here and say scroll dot park. So now I'm going to park this my tree view at the left hand side, rather right. I'll say side is equal to tkinter dot right. Then because it was the first at the right hand side, even though I park this my scroll bar at the right hand side, it will not move my tree view from that position. It will just be beside it. To just be beside it. Now, if you can also remember too, we have to use the Y scroll command on the tree view in order to attach the scroll bar to that tree view. When we looked at vertically scrollable widgets such as the text widget or the scrolled text, or specifically the text widget and the list box, if you can remember, they were vertically scrollable. So in order for that to work, we needed to do something like this. So just go back to my previous tutorial when I talked about the text widget and the list box, and you will see that that is exactly what I'm applying here as well. So now because I did not attach it, attach the Y scroll command to my tree view initially before, that's the reason why I'm doing it here. And I couldn't have done it initially. Why? Because I had not yet created a scroll bar. So I had to create the scroll bar first in order to attach my Y scroll command to it. So I'll come here and say scroll dot set. Only then will it be valid. And after that, I can now come here and start to add different things to my tree view. Now, the very first thing I want to do is to specify how many columns I want to have. Now, you have to write it within strings. So I'm specifying that I want to have 4 columns. So I'll come here, 2, 3, and 4. So this is a practice I have always used. So there might be other practices, but this is how I know how you can add columns to a tree view. Now I'm writing these values in between strings, and they have to be of this number 1, 2, 3, 4 in order to specify that my tree view is going to have 4 columns. So it's a table that is going to display 4 columns based on these data points inside this data set dictionary. So after that, I'll come here and say tree open a square bracket. I will say show is equal to, I'll now say headings. So what this simply means is that I want the headings to be visible. So I'll say TreeView.column. Now I'm saying for the very first column, I want to give it some width of maybe 90, and then so there's something we call anchor. So if you can remember, I already talked about it when we started the. Okay, I might not have talked about it. I might not have, but what anchor does is that on my tree view, a table, like when you are creating a table, the title of a column in a table. So columns are vertical display of data in a table. Now the title of that vertical display of data is referred to as a column name. Now anchor allows us to specify where that name will be positioned, whether towards the left hand side, whether towards the top, towards the right, or towards the bottom, or at the middle, at the center. Now it has different values it uses for that. Now if it's trying to position the column title at the left, it uses the west cardinal point. So there's a constant in Python called west that allows us to position our widget at the left, and then we have another constant called east, which allows us to position our widget, that is the column title rather, at the right. And then we have another constant called not that allows us to position the column title at the top, and another one called south, which allows us to position our column title at the bottom, and another called center. So I'm going to use center, which allows us to position the column title in the middle. So what I would do, I will just copy this and paste it a couple of times. And I will change it to 2, 3, and then the last one, which is 4. I will change it to 4. After this, I also need to, so notice I did something. I said TreeView.column, which allows me to specify which column I'm talking about. So this one means the very first column, I'm giving it a width of 90, and then the title, I'm positioning it at the center, and also for the second, third, and fourth. And also I'm going to come here and say TreeView.heading. So heading allows me to specify which column has a particular heading. You come here, you see text. So the very first one, based on my dictionary, has a column of name. So I will just come there and I will say name. So I will copy it a few more times as well, and then change it to 2, 3, and 4. So 2, 3, and 4, specifying the different columns we have, and then course, school, and CGPA. So course, school, and then CGPA. Okay, let me just check how many minutes I've gone into this video. Okay, so 31 minutes so far. All right, so now the next thing for me to now start displaying this data on my tree view, I'm going to create a for loop. So now I'm going to use the zip class, or the zip function. Now the zip function allows us to be able to combine two data structures together side by side, so that we can be able to use the data in them. It allows us to combine two data structures side by side, so we can be able to use data in them. So I'll do a special video for that. But for example, if I have two lists, maybe both of them have 3 elements in them, I can decide to use the zip function to look through them at the same time. So for the first iteration, I'll create 2 variables. Now those 2 variables will represent the very first element in those 2 lists. It will print them out, or it will do whatever with them. And if you start a second time, and the variable will represent the second element in both lists simultaneously. It allows us to be able to look through two data structures, look through 2 data structures simultaneously. That's what it does. I'll come here and apply that here. I'll say ID, comma, val in zip. And I say zip, so I will just come here and say range, and I will specify 4. So I'll still explain that. Now, because it's a dictionary, I'm trying to look through a dictionary, which is this data set, and I'm trying to access only the keys. So I will be explaining this. So I'll come here and say data set dot keys. I'll tell you why I'm doing just that. Just hold on. Now I'll come here and say insert. Before that, I'll say tree v dot insert. Now, before you start to insert into a tree view, you must open up an empty string. You come here and you say tkinter.end. Now tkinter.end allows you to save time of entering each index position one after the other. So it allows you to save time instead of entering the elements at the 0 index, 1 index, 2 index. You just say .end. It allows you to catch every type of index. You come here and you say text. Now for this text, you can start to specify the line 1, line 2, line 3. But what I did here was that I decided, so you have L1, L2, but I'm not going to be typing L1, L2. Instead, this ID in this for loop, I said that these variables will represent each element in these 2 data structures for each iteration. So for the very first iteration, ID represents 0 and val represents 1. That is this 1 here. For the second iteration, ID represents 1 in my range function, and val represents 2. That is the text 2. So For the first iteration, because normally this text is supposed to have something like this, L1, I'm going to be using this my range function to be placing the text in between, that is beside this my L. In order for it to be of the string data type, I'll have to come here and say str to convert it to a string. I will now say id plus 1. So because the range starts from 0, but to save myself the stress, okay, I'll still do that. So id plus 1, id plus 1. But if I want it to be precise, instead of doing it this way, I'll just come here and say 1 comma 5, so that it will still do the exact same thing, starting from L1, L2, L3 for each iteration. And then after that, you come here and say values. Now this is where you now enter each value that will be displayed in the tree view, that is my table. Now, the very first one, since I'm trying to access from this my each of these dictionaries for each iteration, for the very first iteration, 1 represents my dictionary and I'm accessing all the values at the same time. So I'm not carrying out a nested for loop. If you go back to my previous videos, in order to access them one after the other, you will need another for loop again. But since I'm only creating one for loop, I'm accessing them only once. So it simply means that I'm accessing everything. Since I've already looked through this dictionary, the data set once, and the very first variable, if I was trying to access both of them at the same time, key and value pairs, this will be my key for the first iteration and everything here will be my value. This will be my key for the second iteration. Everything here will be the value of that key. But because I am accessing only, I'm treating everything here as a value of this key, it means that I can access whichever one I want, since I'm only running the iteration once. So, and I'm using 1 to gain access. So for me to access Alex, I'll have to target this name using the variable representing the key 1. So for the first iteration, value val represents 1. So now to access a nested value of, that is to access a value of a nested dictionary, I'll now come here and say data set, open a square bracket, pass val, and then open a square bracket and then pass name. I'm sure this makes sense because based on the way I arrange the headings, the first column will be name, second column will be course, school, CGPA. So you just come here, put a comma, and the reason why I'm not converting it to a string is because if you look at the dictionary, it's already of the string data type, so there's no need. And you can come here again and say data set, and you also access the same val, open a square bracket, then you access the next one, which is course. So to take it to a new line so that we do not have problems here, you cannot see my code. I will just come here to the next line and I will say data set. So data set, open a square bracket, val, come here, open another square bracket, school. And after that, I'll come here. Now, because this one is of the float data type, I have to convert it to be of the string data type first. Now, come here and say data set, open a square bracket, say val, open another square bracket, I'll say CGPA. So CGPA. That's it. So this should allow me to insert into my TreeView. So I'll come here. So I've already packed it already. So I've packed my TreeView. That was the first thing I did. Then you can now come here and run your main loop. Say window dot main loop. When you run your code, you will see that it will display a table with these values already inside. So you have Alex, physics, Oxford, CGPA, you have mathematics, geology. So I think there was a problem with one of the names there in the dictionary. So I'll just go and correct that. So I'll just say Adam, and I will try to increase the weight. I'll give it 500 so that you can be able to see. And you can see my scroll bar attached to it already. So the scroll bar is there, but it cannot work because I've not added multiple rows to it. So let me just try to repeat some values in that dictionary so that you can get a glimpse of what I'm trying to say. And after I've done this, I'll just come here and say fill equal to tkinter dot y. It's going to fill the entire y axis so that it can be extended, and I will just copy this one a couple of times so that you can be able to see everything that I'm doing. I'll just say 5, 5, put a comma, I'll just say 6, 7. So just to activate the scroll bar, that's why I'm doing all this, so that you can be able to see it scroll. So EIGHT. So what I'll just do after this one, I'll just go and reduce the height of the scroll bar so that you can be able to see, sorry, of the frame, so that the tree view can also adapt the height. Coming like this thing is not. Okay, so it has already stopped, so I'll make it, because of the range, that's why it stopped. Then I give it to 8, so that's going to be 1 2 9. Let us see it. That. So what I'll do, I will just reduce the height even more so that you'll be able to see it scroll. Right. So now you can see my scroll bar has been activated. So if I should move it, you see that it's moving through the values. So that is how you can create a tree view. We're going to use this as an update to be able to display our data in our database from the last project, the banking system. So you can see all the people that you have inserted into the database in a proper manner. So that's what we're going to do in the next class. But let us look at the last widget for today, which is the top level. So I'll just right click on my folder, come here, I'll say top level widget. Now, so you come here, you say import tkinter, you now say window equal to tkinter.tk, and after that you come down here, you say window dot title. The title is going to be top level project. And after that you come here, you say window dot geometry. I'll give it a size of 300 by 400. So I just like that size anyway. So this, I'm going to use a window screen to generate another window screen. So inside this my window screen here, I will come here and say small, I'll just call it small. I'll say tkinter dot top level. So it's like your tk, but it depends on your tk. So I'll just come here and say small dot. So when I say it depends, it means that if I close my tk window screen, that is the window screen generated by the tk class, it is also going to close as well. So I'll come here, I'll just call it top level. Then you come down here and say window dot geometry, and I'll give it 300 by 400. And after that, I will also have to call its own main loop. So it has a main loop function that allows the window screen to be generated as well, similar to your tk class. So I'll come here and say window dot main loop. Now you discover that when I run this code, it's going to generate two window screens for me, with one of them dependent on the other. So you click on run and you discover that I have two window screens generated. So this is the second one. Hold on, I think there's a small problem here. Okay, so I gave it 300 by 400. It's supposed to be the same size too. Mm, so that was my mistake. I said small. I said window instead of small. Now I also want to give them some text, some labels. So I'll just say text one is equal to tkinter dot label. I'll say window text main window. So the main window they have some font, say Arial 30, say text one dot arc. After that, you can also come here and put it in your small window. I'll just say small, top level rather, so top level. So run your code. So you will see that, hold on, mistake again. So I will need to change that this text on the small window, not on my main window. So it's very important so that you can differentiate the both of them. Now you see that when I separate them, you see that they are the same size. But notice something. When I close this main window screen, the small one will also close. But when I close the small one, the main one will not close. So this is very important. It's important because we will need it to update our banking system. So I might do it, I might not. But if you are feeling curious, if you are following my previous tutorial, you can decide to change the other window screens that are dependent on my main login page. You can decide to change them to the top level so that when you close them, or rather when you close the main window screen, they too will also get closed. So it's very important. Or it's not really important like that, but it allows you to simulate a real life event, the way a real life event will happen or occur. When you create a project and you open up some other window screens from your main window screen, it is only proper that when your main window screen is closed, they too will also close. All right, so that brings us to the end of today's tutorial, today's tutorial episode of my Python tutorial series. So if you are liking my videos, if you are liking what I'm doing, if this video was informative to you, please hit that like button. And if you feel like it will be of importance to someone, or someone might need a thing or two in their programming skills, specifically Python, please share. And if you want to encourage me to continue to do more content like this, please hit that subscribe button. Until next time, it's goodbye for now.